The topic of comparison, the benefits of it, if there are benefits, the negative parts about it, and how it kind of keeps us stuck in being able to really form our own unique elements and cultivate that, how it could slow us down.
It's all about perspective, right? And how we choose to look at things that can either help us or hurt us when it comes to, comparison.
The truth is that comparison is just a part of being human. The question is, what do we do with it? Are we going to use it to our benefit, or are we going to tear ourselves down with it? I'm going to just geek out here for a quick second, bring us back to Psych 101. So there is a psychological term for this. It's called social comparison theory. Are you comparing yourself to tear yourself down, or are you challenging yourself to grow, to be your better self?
In terms of the individual clients that you do work with, what do you do? What strategies do you use to help your clients identify their own inner voice? All right, welcome back to another episode of the Let's Talk Perspective podcast. My name is Kelly Baker. I'm a licensed therapist in New Jersey and owner of Perspective Counseling and Wellness. And I'm back with my friends, Nicolle DeLuca and Kevin English, both therapists as well. How you guys doing?
Doing good.
Doing good.
Pretty
Good. All right. So I'm excited about today's topic. We are going to base it off of actually an article I wrote this quarter for the Moorestown Living magazine, and it is called Cultivating Your Own Bloom, Practical Steps to Stop Comparing and Start Thriving. So I'm very interested today to talk on the topic of comparison, the benefits of it, if there are benefits, the negative parts about it, and how it kind of keeps us stuck in being able to really form our own unique elements and cultivate that, and how it could slow us down as well by paying attention to others, comparing ourselves to others. So I'm excited to get into it. I am going to start with a small little excerpt from the article. So I did it in spring. I did all of these articles, based off of the season. So I did compare it to a lot of garden elements. But it starts off saying, spring is a season full of lessons. Daffodils don't pause to compare their petals to cherry blossoms. They bloom where they are planted fully and beautifully, without hesitation or self-doubt. Nature thrives by embracing its uniqueness, and so can we. But unlike flowers, humans often fall into comparison, a silent sabotage that whispers we're not enough and dims the light of our individuality. Mm-hmm. So I just kind of, that's a small step into it. And then, we'll go more into how we can compare less, maybe where we could stop comparing and maybe use that to be inspired. But I wanted to get each of your perspectives a little bit to start with your take on comparison. And
I'm going
down the line. I told you guys I looked down the line. I'm going to start with Kevin today.
Okay, cool. Listen, I love this topic. And when I graduated college, undergrad, I did a lot of comparison. There were a lot of my colleagues and peers who were getting jobs in their field, and it took me about 2 years to find a job in the field that I went to school for. So I was really discouraged. I felt like that, my peers had a great start, and I'm just trying to play catch up. And I joke with people, and I said I felt like I was having like a midlife crisis at like 24. So so comparison, is real, but to me, shameless plug, it's all about perspective, right? And how we choose to look at things, that can either help us or hurt us when it comes to, comparison.
Yeah. Absolutely. That was a great answer and so true, in terms of kind of I one time I remember seeing my son's track meet, and I this every time I think of comparison, I think of watching him run track, because I tell him all the time that he's so much faster if he just looks forward, but every time he looked to the side, it would slow him down
Yeah.
every single time. And I swear every time I think of comparison, I think of that, because it really does. We start looking side to side, and it kind of keeps us off our own path. And that's why I too love this topic and love that answer. Great answer, Kev. And Nicolle, how about you? What is your perspective on comparison?
So I think the truth is that comparison is just a part of being human. The
Yeah.
question is, what do we do with it? Are we going to use it to our benefit, or are we going to tear ourselves down with it? Obviously scrolling through like Instagram or, Facebook, hearing about a friend's promotion or this perfect relationship. It's easy to feel like you're falling behind and that you're not measuring up. And I think like as clinicians, we could all agree that the comparison amplifier really is social media. And it's basically like a highlighted reel of people's best moments,
Yeah.
whether it be
Absolutely.
promotions, weddings, 6-pack abs, the kids' sports highlights, we don't see the behind the scenes, the struggles, the failures, the insecurities.
Yeah.
Yet we
Absolutely.
continue to like just compare our real life, our messy, our complicated to just like someone's selected images.
Right.
And like, no wonder why we don't feel good enough or that we're not bringing enough to the table or whatever it may be. And just like thinking of myself right now, just because I am a mental health professional doesn't mean that I'm immune to feeling these insecurities. Just the other day, I was scrolling through and I noticed this, perfect physique, right? And immediately I was like totally forgot all of what I was doing. Like I totally forgot that I had been working hard in the gym and that I was increasing my protein and taking my supplements, drinking my water. And I forgot about all the progress that I was making
Yeah.
on my own, in that moment. And, I don't get to see this person's bad days or their doubts or, their unedited photos. I just have to remind myself that, I could reframe this, use tools, which I'm sure we're going to talk about, but like to stop the chatter and take what I need to motivate myself.
Yeah.
I have to constantly remind myself that I'm on a different path and that success doesn't have one definition.
Yeah, absolutely. That's such a great point. The social media element of everybody kind of showing the best parts of themselves, right? Just like celebrating in moments. But I think too, what some of this teaches, or what I think I've learned to appreciate over the years, because there was so many times that it can rob us of our self-worth by being like, I don't have this, or this isn't attainable. When really I had so much more, I don't know if it's gratitude or admiration for those people who started going on social media and showing how beautiful it is to be imperfect, right? And like, and you speak to body and physique. It's such a big one, with social media, those people who kind of will show themselves, the before and after, like, this is what I did when I stood this way, and this is what I did when I stood that way. And both are beautiful, right? But this like perfectionism mentality that is a shame, because it keeps people stuck from putting themselves out there, when really we just want something to connect to and something that I think is unique to offer, right? And is beautiful in its own way. So we have this idea that it has to be perfect. And I think if we can eliminate that part, it really helps a whole lot in just embracing who you are. So I think that's a great answer. I love that. I definitely have some specific questions for you guys too. I know that I gave before, starting with Kevin. Kevin, I wanted to know if you had any thoughts. We work with couples, right? So I know we discussed this a little bit last time, but how you see comparison affect your clients' sense of identity in relationships and family systems.
Yeah, so I'm a I see it from a couple of different lenses, right? So the first lens that I'll take it from is when I'm working with the dynamics of a family or a couple, right? Because sometimes they let's say we're working with a couple. I'm working with a couple. The one partner could be focusing on what the other person is doing and everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And what I notice when that happens, they're not really paying attention to themselves and the work
Yes.
that they should be doing. It's like, well, this person didn't do this and this person didn't do that. When it's like, okay, cool, but what are we supposed to be working on?
Right.
What was our, goals for that particular partner that we came up with? Is sometimes I have to like do some redirecting in, couples counseling. And again, it can show up the same way, with family.
Yeah.
The, but
Yeah. I wondered how much you've had this because I know I've had this a lot lately. I know speaking of perspective, and that's what we're doing here, but so many um, of the couples I notice where they are comparing each other to like they can't even come outside of their own experiences. Like it's like, well, I would never think this way ever. And I don't know how you could ever think this way, or I don't struggle with this. So why can't you just have it be this easy? Like there's just this element where they compare so much to themselves, but they don't even kind of try to see it also too from the other lens either. And it kind of, I say, shoots it down because they're just not open to that
Mhm.
element, of each other that way. So I agree with you on the constant redirection to not compare it that way.
yeah, and I think it will be kind of hard for couples to have that type of compassion and understanding, when they're in survival, right?
Mm,
When they want to feel safe, it doesn't matter, that this person may have no understanding what this person is going through or how to provide what it is that they need. That person just want to feel safe,
yeah.
and they want to feel safe in their conception of what safety is and what it looks like.
Right. Absolutely. That makes total sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so true. That's so good.
Yeah.
And Nicolle too, I know that had some information to share with us too on the social and psychological roots of comparison. So
Yes.
can
Um, yes. So what I was going to say about that is that, okay, so gathering my thoughts for a quick second, I'm going to like just geek out here for a quick second. I'm going to like bring us back to Psych 101, right? So,
Yeah.
there is a like for real psychological term for this. Like it's called like social comparison theory. And it was this guy came up with this, I guess, ideology that in from the mid 50s. And what he says, and I want to read it because I feel like his definition of it is really spot on. So it's the idea that we determine our personal worth based on how we stack up against others, whether it's success, our looks, our intelligence, our relationships. We look around at other people to help us figure that out. And there's not like an objective way to measure, am I doing well in my job or in my career? I mean, or like, am I a good parent? Am I attractive? So, it could go two ways. So we could compare ourselves to people that we think are better than us. Whether it's like they're more successful, they're more attractive, they have more money, or we could do kind of like a downward comparison where we compare ourselves to those that we think are doing worse. So
Right.
either way affects our self-esteem differently, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to explain how deeply tied comparison is to evolution. And the reason why I want to go into this is because I feel that it's important to normalize it. I think it's important to explain how inherently human it is to compare ourselves to others. And it's going back to like during like, evolution, we evolved in social groups, right? So knowing your status was crucial to survival. It was crucial to get resources and even like mating. So, when you think about the cavemen, right, go back in time, and that kind of helped us, compare whether there were like real threats. Who's our friends? Who's our enemies?
Right.
Where are the opportunities? And what's funny is when I was thinking about this, I kept thinking of the show The Walking Dead, right? And not the zombie piece of it. That's not it. It's more like that the show was like based in this set that was like this post-apocalyptic world, right?
Yeah.
Where all modern stuff, amenities, was just like stripped away. And the show reflects how comparison shifts with survival changes, right? So, currently in the modern world, we compare ourselves with external markers like profession, wealth, or appearance. But, those markers change when it comes down to survival, who can lead, who can survive, who can protect others, and which group is getting it right. So we're kind of hardwired to identify who's doing it right and who's not doing it right.
Right.
But I guess, the point I'm trying to make is that it's deeply rooted.
Yeah.
And that's how we survive. So, the intention, or maybe the connection to the intention that I'm trying to say, is that, are you comparing yourself to tear yourself down? Or are you challenging yourself to grow, to be your better self?
Right.
And then kind of figuring out like, which is it bringing toxicity up, and where's the danger in that? And, is there too much self-criticism? And is that voice that's constantly saying like, you're behind, you're not enough, you'll never get there, other people are better than you. That's when like burnout creeps in. And, let's be honest, no one's getting anywhere if we're just constantly putting ourselves down.
Well, and I think like, and we'll go obviously more into it, but you brought up such great points and all the great questions, right? This is where comparison is such a fine line, because in one regard, you said it, I kind of marked some of this down, like robbing us of our self-worth because we're comparing ourselves almost so much to others, right? I think that's where it's like extremely dangerous, because if we can use it as inspiration, right? If we could say, hey, I like this element, but do I know who I am? What my best self is, what I want for my best authentic self, right? Take something someone does and make it your way, right? Come into your own with it. Or am I trying to be someone else in a way that doesn't feel right, where you're trying to fit a mold that isn't you? I know I've fallen into that as a mother. I am not a type A mother, but for some reason I felt like I needed to be. You go on Instagram, they have these moms, right? Oh my gosh, I can't stop watching them. My husband's always like, just turn that off because you're just making yourself sick. Like, they get up every morning at 5 a.m. for their 7 kids, and they meal prep the day, and they get in a workout, and they arrange everybody's clothes. You guys know me. I'm like a hot mess all the time. So, but I see that. You think like that's what being a good mother is. So then you try fitness, your anxiety's high, it's bad. And then you know what? When I kind of could say, hey, what fits me, but is the best version of myself, right? I feel a little bit more like it's helping me to grow. Like maybe I
Right.
want to take elements of what she's doing to keep myself on track, but my way, right? So I think that kind of helps because you got to figure out what is your path. I think, what is your way? I think that helps you kind of come out of the toxic side of comparison rather than being lost holding on to all these ideas of what you should be, but not thinking you can ever measure up. How do we identify if it's something that's healthy or it's not?
Mm.
To me, I look at it as the thought process. Some people, can obsess over it and it can be an unhealthy way. It takes too much, time and operates too much, like space in your brain.
Mm.
Two, I look at it as, like what is the attitude, right? Like is the attitude coming from a place as far as like motivation, happiness, or is it coming from a place of, your mood is low, if you're comparing it to a person and when this person name or you're in this person present, like your mood get down. So, I look at it from those two things to identify if it's healthy or unhealthy.
Yeah. I think that's great. I think it really does. It starts with awareness, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that is what is, and you guys both said it, like, what is this bringing up inside of me? What is this triggering for me? Is it something that, I can make something better of myself with, or is it something that
Hmm.
is blocking my growth or who I authentically am supposed to become? I had one client that she told me her dream in life, she like loves the idea of social media. She like wants to do the whole mom social media videos. Like she loves it, but she just can't. She's so afraid of judgment. She's so afraid of this comparison thing that it is holding her back from living her authentic life. So then I wonder, maybe you ask yourself too, what is it holding me back from?
Mm-hmm.
you know, to kind of play it safe. So, that these I think are all great things. Kevin, I did have a question for you in terms of, the individual clients that you do work with. What do you do? What strategies do you use to help your clients identify their own inner voice?
Ooh. So again, I use again the psycho analysis approach, like for this, and it's normally is collecting a lot of data,
Mm-hmm.
that might stems from, like client history and understanding certain relationships, things that were said, and to be able to help them identify certain patterns. I had this one client who mom was you know, bringing up things like, like she's lazy and everything like that, like, and she felt judged,
Mm.
and at work, her colleagues, although it was joking, they would say things, but she took it as judgy,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm.
And from there, like I was able to tie it back, like, like because this, like it's coming across as judgmental from your standpoint, like, this is probably kind of bringing up some things, like from your mom when, you felt like you were being judged by her. So
Yeah.
like we were able to make that comparison. I know you said that we weren't going to talk about art, but like being able to being able to, like use a certain type of script that, helps bring up, like inner voices and everything like that.
Yeah.
To me, I think that that's also, like a powerful tool to identify, like inner critics.
Inner
Mm-hmm.
critics. That's such a good point. Kind of how to find your inner voice. Is your inner voice yours? Or is your inner
Yeah.
voice, an inner critic or, rooted from values or family, that family voice of things that you just are taught and told, and cultural elements that are there as well that lead you to comparison, right? So, I love that. I think that's such an interesting way to bring about helping people find that and recognizing that and how to work through that, because it is kind of our inner critic is probably where it really, that part, I'm thinking in parts work now, that inner critic part is probably that their relationship with comparison is probably where it gets toxic, I would imagine. Yeah. Yeah, very interesting. And then Nicolle, too, I know I mentioned I was going to ask you a little bit about how basically comparison, creates burnout to measure up, especially in women, and teens, which we talked about in the social media aspect. But, what else you say to, I know women, it's and men, it's both hard, but what do you have for us on that?
So I could identify with this. As I shared earlier, my own personal experience, but I really feel like I know why. It's definitely the combination of just societal expectations and this internalized perfectionism, right? So like women frequently face these conflicting societal standards or messages. Like we have to be a successful professional. We have to be a nurturing caregiver. We have to be physically attractive. We have to be emotionally available all at once, right? So, that just is going to create constant pressure and the feeling of just not being enough, because it's impossible. It's impossible to be all those things perfectly at once. But, internalizing the belief that they have to be perfect in their role as being a mother, like you had mentioned, a partner, for me, I think it leads to just overworking, having difficulty saying no, neglecting self-care. And obviously that leads to burnout.
Right.
But I do have to also just mention, I feel like women specifically, I'm sorry, Kevin, carry.
It's all good. Because I got
I'm
something
going
for the
to
men,
ask
so go
about
ahead.
men too. I swear.
Women just carry a disproportionate share of emotional labor. At both work and at home. And, maybe because I'm a woman, so, I'm over identifying with that. But I mean, for me at work, and other women in leadership roles, smoothing the team dynamic constantly and, taking care of coworkers and just, making sure the team is cohesive and we're connecting. And I always and then at home being like a wife and a mother, I'm event planning or coordinating schedules, wifing, doing all the things. But also as a program director, I always tell my staff, please do not expect perfection from me. I would never expect it from you. And I like to just humanize the fact that we make mistakes. I am very transparent that I miss the mark, that I forget, that I misinterpret comments or gestures, and that I think the beautiful part of that is that I have a conversation with my team about that. And that just leads to us having a better connection together and feeling comfortable working with each other, that I am not expecting what's not realistic from them as they're not from me.
Well, wouldn't it just make it all just so much better if more people could continue to put out there their imperfect and their mistakes and that we're human, so much of us is held back by comparison because of the fear of judgment and the fear of not being perfect. Right. So and I think that is one of the strategies, is finding a way to appreciate people who make mistakes, the imperfect, and appreciating that in yourself, because I really do. I think that eliminates so much and allows you, to compare more healthily,
Mm-hmm.
really. I do. So I love that you put that out there, for them, because I'm sure it gives you a lot less anxiety to
It
put
does.
yourself out there, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's my biggest fear, when I talked about this article, to stop comparing and start thriving, is because my biggest gripe with it is it holds us back. It holds us back from figuring out who we are, and it holds us back mainly. So many people don't even want to put themselves out there at all, and that's a shame, because everybody's uniqueness, I think, is what makes everything in the world so beautiful. So I agree. And I think too, Nicolle, just, I know when it comes to body image, you brought it up a little bit before, but when I think of women and teens, I know that I see teenagers here, and oh my, like, we are working nonstop through
Yeah.
comparison of body image. And I noticed that in teenagers, it really is really hard to debunk then,
Mm-hmm.
because they do have such a standard. And even I'm thinking of myself as a teenager, comparing myself to friends who were ballerinas and
Yeah.
very, a certain body type. And then feeling more, once I understood my own body type, knowing what I wanted to do to measure up to be my healthiest, best me, rather than something that wasn't me at all. Again,
Mm-hmm.
that's another just scenario of really kind of getting to go inward and knowing yourself and what you want for you, and allowing everything else in to motivate that for you. So yeah, I think that's great. And it's so true. We do it. I think the perfectionism element is what makes it so toxic. It really is. And Kev, I gotta acknowledge the men, right? Like, comparison for men. Educate us. Cause I know I can speak for Nicolle and I, as two people who've worked through a lot of, I think, personal self
Mm-hmm.
criticism, and probably have had to do a lot of work over the years with comparison and coming to a good place with it. Um, Help us understand what it's like for men in terms of comparing.
Yeah, I think, especially with me, I look at comparing when it comes to um being a provider, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like how I'm doing, as a provider, stacked up compared to, like other people, and that can look like, hey, am I able to take my family on vacation like I might see other people, like, what is the living space looking like, like, like the house there, is it not there? Is it big? Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's all those kind of things that I look at, and I know most men look at too, when it comes to being a provider,
Yeah.
and wanting to have enough and not, like lacking anything, or not wanting to feel like, if the wife or the kids, they need something, and not being able to like look them in the face and say, can't do it.
Yeah.
Especially if it's a need. If it's a need, like that's just a big blow to the ego.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the second thing is, um, just feeling desired. But again, the providing or the money aspect, kind of helps with the, feeling desired, helps with the confidence.
So almost
You
like for
know,
men, what you can offer in some kind of way and provide, it sounds like. Is that true?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, cause most men look at it like, their self-worth is tied into, what they do or what they
Mm,
can do,
Mm-hmm.
right.
and that's how they look at it. And I think that, and I love what you said, Nicole, and how you, spoke from a woman's perspective, but I think that, men and women, like we're both carrying some type of toll, but it just looks different,
Yeah.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that if we were to have like more vulnerable conversations like this and, be more transparent and honest as far as like, hey, like this is what I got going on my plate.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I'm experiencing. Like, what is your expectation of me? Because, like, I could be putting a high expectation that my partner, is not even, it's not even thinking of,
Right.
and vice versa. Like, they could be putting a high expectation, like, the house gotta be clean, gourmet meals gotta be cooked every day, laundry gotta be folded, and, and it's just like, nah, like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't really expect all that, especially if I know how that might be impacting you mentally and emotionally and physically and everything like that. So I love what you said, but I think that if we could have more open and honest conversation and being transparent, I think that can go a long way.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It brings up a great point, Kevin, because I'm just thinking of it as you say it. Like, how often do we internalize that we even compare or have envy, or that we hold this kind of weight of these expectations we have for ourselves and how hard we are on ourselves, because you hit the nail on the head, is that I think when the comparison becomes a level of like self-worth, that's a lot to carry, whether it's in what you said, where males want to show up as providers, or females and how they, enter things emotionally, or I'll just say it physically. I think
Mm-hmm.
that we put a lot of self-worth into what do we look like physically, that plays a huge part into it. So and being able to have those conversations and say, I do struggle with this, and I am finding my way with it, I think, is one great way to navigate. It brings up that awareness piece, which I think is the first space for anything, of kind of understanding what it resonates with us, and then having those talks with others. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I have like a couple more questions, but what are just a few ways, we kind of identified comparison, how it can show up, but what are just some ways that you guys also feel we can offer, right, to people listening, to our clients, to others, to kind of help stop comparison in the way that it is toxic? I will talk like a little bit on how it can be positive, and we talked about the inspirational piece, but just kind of how to really focus more inward.
Who you want to go with?
I'll go with, I think I'm gonna go with Nicolle first on this one. She looks ready.
All right. So
Okay.
I always will say, bring awareness to recognizing it. So
Mm-hmm.
notice when you're falling into the trap, because you can't change what you don't notice. So spending some time there. And also, I think sometimes people have a tendency to forget progress that they've made. So
Mm,
I always like to remind people to look back at where you started, not where someone else is now.
right.
Um, and what does success mean to you? What does progress look like to you on your terms? What am I proud of today? And our brain has this very beautiful and unique capability of like time travel, right? So we're able to, in our minds, go back in time and remember where we started and actually connect all the steps we've taken to get to a certain place.
Yeah.
And we also have this beautiful ability to, fantasize ahead and have a picture of what it could look like, for what your ideal life would look like or your ideal self, or what progress looks like on your terms, that we do have some control over this.
Yeah. Absolutely. Agreed. Kind of like understanding like your own measurement and path, and where you started, and what your progress is, and what's actually important to you. I think that's such a great way to put it, because that does bring it right back, like Kevin said, where he talked about the couples, bringing it back to you. That's so hard. Like, we have
Mm-hmm.
to do so much work as therapists to bring people back. People deflect, people
Yeah.
project, people, it's like, well, what does this bring up for you? Let's bring it back to you. It's hard for us go inward, to
Yes.
measure our own progress, to do that hard work sometimes.
Mhm.
I mean, think of haters, right? Like, I feel like it's like sometimes I feel like it is an element of that, kind of wanting to put down another person who's put work in, because maybe, they don't want to give credit to them or the efforts that they've put in,
Right.
but instead of just measuring up, to themselves. So I love that. I think that's great. And what about you, Kev? What do you think are just some ways people could compare less, kind of focus more inward?
Yeah, to me, I think having a good support network or a um having that person, like everyone needs a person,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I
Mm,
think that, if you have that person, like you can be, honest and transparent with them so that way they can bring you back to reality.
yeah.
That way they can, like speak life into you, or just offer you like words of encouragement. So I think that that is helpful. I was reading a book, and it's called The Power of Awareness by Neville Goddard. And man, that book is amazing.
Mm.
And it's actually, speaking to what you were saying, Nicole, about like looking ahead in the future,
Yeah.
right? It says sometimes like, like we can our mood could be low because like we're like comparison as far as like what we don't have, or um we're not where we, like want to be, and the books talk about, how the mind is powerful, and, you can visualize yourself, having it so you can obtain, like that feeling of gratification,
Yeah.
like that you long
Mm,
for and everything like that. And I think that that is, powerful. And again, I know that we're not going to talk about art, but, um, like that's why I think, like art is great,
mm,
because of the visualization,
Yeah.
like component to it and
Yeah.
everything like that,
yeah.
so
For those who
yeah,
don't
that's my take.
know, art is it's called Accelerator Resolution Therapy, and we will do a podcast episode on it. But it does use, to Kevin's point, a lot of visualization. We'll go more into detail, but we walk through a lot of, and it reframes the whole mind, to see things in a visual way and to review and view the perspective differently.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
also knowing that the lens that we see sometimes isn't coming from a factual lens. Like,
Right.
it's, you know what I mean? We're very influenced.
Mhm.
And through healing, it can look so different. So when we compare ourselves, I think we really need to ask ourselves, how is this benefiting us? Or is it inhibiting who we are? One thing I'll add that I know that has helped me a lot with it is, is gratitude, I think, speaking to what you do have, and what you do bring and what you do provide. And sometimes it's hard for people to see that in themselves. And that's the beauty of going to therapy, is helping you come into who you authentically are, loving your authentic self,
Yeah,
for who it is. And I believe that that's what you really kind of need to do, to kind of not measure your worth towards these other things, right? So I think all of this is really good. Any
Kelly, can
other
I
just
piggyback
suggestions?
a little
Yeah.
bit of your gratitude comments?
Yeah.
I think sometimes with gratitude, because people like are always think it's so cliche, right?
Right.
Focus on what's good
Right.
in your life, and what's yours. But I feel like sometimes when you help them become a little bit more specific,
Mm,
so like instead of just like, I'm grateful for my life, something like, I'm grateful that I had time to talk with my friend today, or I'm grateful that my body let me take this walk this morning.
yeah.
Sometimes when you just break it down smaller and
Right.
and a little bit more measurable, they can make the connection.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think, yeah, I
I love
agree.
that.
Yeah, because sometimes too, maybe sometimes it's hard for people to find the gratitude when all you see is what everybody else has, and you really struggle with that. So kind of helping them to navigate that and coming to therapy or just talking to someone you trust to say, hey, these are the things you do have, those little things, right? I'm thinking again with body image. It's tough after you have a baby. It's rough, but like, to reframe it, you could say, hey, I'm grateful, that my body was able to do this. And it's a perspective shift. It's a mind, a way of changing the mind. And if you struggle to do that, then acknowledging the struggle to do that and just being grateful to have the space to talk about that with somebody. So you can kind of find it in anything. So I like that you break that down, Nicolle, because I think that's so important, So any other just suggestions to help with comparison or thoughts on it?
I feel like this is maybe an obvious one, but maybe it's not. If something isn't working, stop. So like limit your exposure, right? So like if you're constantly getting triggered with unhealthy things, whether it's social media or Instagram or whatever, you have the ability to control that environment. So, just, build your environment that reflects the mind of the person you want to be, not the person you're pressured to become. And, with the algorithms, you have the ability to somewhat make that work.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point, is limit the exposure. How many people say that they are like, I'm taking a break from social media because I just need to, it's not healthy, Or, I mean, I haven't watched the news, so don't ask me what's going on.
I don't watch the news.
I don't watch it, and not because of comparison. It's more to sensitivity of all the media trauma. But like, I just can't. I know. I'm like, this makes me crazy. It's not bringing out my best self, So if comparison is not, is making you feel paralysis by perfectionism or holding you back because of fear of judgment, or just kind of creates false timelines. Like you said, I should be further along than I am, when you're not really paying attention to your own path and maybe how far along you are in your own journey. I think you have to recognize, like, what am I surrounding myself with that has me this stuck? And what can I surround myself with positively, right? That does sometimes require changing who you're hanging around. Or like the kind of information or things you're hearing from other people or the stuff that you're watching, to things that, do kind of bring out the best in you. So I love that point. That's so true. And then I guess before I sort of wrap up, I won't go into all my questions and throw, Nicolle off terribly here. But, just, I didn't speak to much to the positives of it, even though we did kind of highlight the positives. It can motivate you. It can help you to grow. I have always used comparison very positively for the most part, in terms of like, if there's something I really want, I want to find my own way to attain it at this stage. Not always. Teenage years, definitely not. Definitely a lot of other years. But is there any other positive things that we could look for from comparison?
I think that is plenty.
Mm.
Um, like with me, I'm always um inspired, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like, kind of what you said, Nicole, as far as like, it kind of um brings out something in you, like, oh well, yeah, that's something that I like, or something like that. And um you know, my bishop, um to the church that I go to, um kind of spoke on it, like, like, hey, don't get mad when you see someone else get blessed. Like, that's just
Mm.
showing you, like, hey, like, like what God is capable of. So like when I do see, people blessed, whether that is, like, in, their business or something like that, it just reminds me, oh, well, like God is capable of doing that,
Yeah.
so, and that's how I kind of look at it, when I see, people living in, like big, and I'm talking big homes, like it just makes me get inspired. Like, okay, that's something to aspire,
Right.
like to have. And even if, like, I don't, obtain that, at least I'm working towards something to get something as close. Oh, one last thing.
Mhm.
'Cause I always put it out there, whatever. I always tell people, especially, like coming to this field, like I want to be the greatest therapist, right? And that is a big goal, but again, the way how I look at it as not, comparing myself that I'm better than everybody or anybody, but it's more so like having that goal will always will help me to strive to keep learning, to
Mm,
keep, being better and better and better, by obtaining, such a big feat.
yeah. I like that. And I agree with you, kind of saying it. It's almost like I want to be the best therapist, and almost like to yourself, it sounds like, too. And probably what I kind of noticed too, and what I love about this field in terms of other therapists is I appreciate everybody's differences, right? Like it
Mhm.
would just be kind of boring if all three of us came on here with the same perspective and we're exactly the same and did everything the same, it wouldn't be good. So I think that's kind of tying it all into what this brought up is it's not even so much about comparing per se, but really kind of establishing like your own self-worth and like who you are. I think from a more inward path than outward, really, can just, I don't know, it could do beautiful things because I love people. I know not everybody loves people. I do because I think they're all so interesting and different. And I just kind of appreciate everybody's individual beauty. And that's been, I think, the most beautiful part about this age and stage of my life journey is just appreciating things for being different and beautiful in different ways. Right. So
Yeah.
I think that that's great. I loved what everybody had to offer. Thank you guys so much. Any other comments before we kind of wrap up?
Yeah, so like I guess if I had like a closing
Yeah.
remark, it would be, next time you catch yourself comparing, just remember that, and maybe because this has been helpful for me, their journey isn't your journey. Their timeline isn't your timeline. And your path is still unfolding imperfectly and uniquely. So when we understand how it works, we could become more intentional, which we talked about, and asking yourself, how do I, not maybe how do I measure up to them, but what does this feeling tell me about what I value or what I want?
Yeah. That's beautifully said. I think another piece I want to add to, and then I'll let Kevin, if you have a closing remark, I definitely do, but is I think too, and you guys have talked about support, but really kind of not listening so hard or showing compassion and love. Now I'm thinking, no, another therapeutic modality. I won't go into all of them, but there's one called internal family systems. And that inner critic part, just be really aware of it, observe it, and observe how that comes in when it comes to comparison, how it shuts you down, where the root of it comes from, I think is really important. I think notice how that affects what you listen to and take in your outer life. Are you surrounding yourself trying to prove yourself to other critics in your life, or are you allowing in the people who see you and remind you of who you are and remind yourself? I think it is such a deeper question of that, and healing that inner critic, I think it's such a huge part, because I think comparison gets toxic when it really triggers and activates the inner critic. And that's sort of, from hearing you guys talk, is something that resonated with me. And just my conclusion, or the little thing I wrote, comparison becomes a thief when we use it to judge our worth, which we mentioned. But when we choose to reflect rather than compete, it becomes a tool, a quiet teacher that can remind us what we care about and why we started. So I think that really kind of resonated with me, especially with what you guys have been sharing, is that it can be a helpful tool to signal stuff for us, but to use it as that and to reflect and to let it help us achieve what we want and how we want it, right? Rather than define who we are. So that's my closing thought. Kev, anything you got to close us out?
Not as beautiful as you guys, but
Don't compare,
hey, good one,
Be
good one.
yourself. Yeah.
But what I will say is that, you are, where you're meant to be, and I was going to bring the analogy up, Kelly, something similar but a little different when you mentioned your son, like racing in track. There's a picture of Michael Phelps racing, and and there's this other guy, he's looking at
Yeah.
like Michael Phelps and everything like that, and it's like a quote, like one are focused on their own lanes and everything
Yeah.
like that, and just stay in your lane,
Anyway.
it's not a in some cases, but in life, and in this particular sense, like it's not a race, it's a journey,
Mhm.
like you'll get to your destination, like when it's time to get to your destination.
Yeah, these are great. I love all this. And I honestly, I think for both, we all are, even though we weren't supposed to talk about this, we're all trained in accelerated resolution therapy. And I think, I don't know about you guys, but I know since I've done this training and I've been doing it as often as I have, I speak in visuals a lot. So I really like the Michael Phelps and, thinking of my son in the track, because I think we have to, we feel a comparison, but what it
Right.
looks like and kind of the visual of how it slows us down, I think is so impertinent. So this was amazing. I want to thank you both for your wonderful perspectives again. We'll be back. I'm not sure what the topic will be, but I'm sure it'll be a good one. So thank you everyone for listening, and thank you both so much for being here.
Thanks.